Hello, welcome back. Today I'm going to do a short video on basic welders to buy for the DIYer. A lot of videos on YouTube I've seen, they do get overcomplicated about things and some of them are a bit scary. So a big thanks to Dave Carpenter for the idea. I would never have thought of it. So I'll go through the basics of what I believe is the best welder for somebody who's never welded before, really inexperienced and who just wants to have a go. Also a run through of basic equipment you'll need, some safety tips, which I have got quite a few of them, I'll show you in a bit. But remember, this video is all about somebody who's never welded before, somebody who just wants to have a go or maybe just play about. It's not aimed at somebody who's already a proficient welder. This is really just basic stuff. So let's crack on. For your basic DIY welder, somebody who's never welded before and you've got absolutely no experience whatsoever, you've two options, in my opinion. You've got your MIG or your arc. There is also a price issue. You can pay a lot more for a MIG than what you can with an arc. You can pick an arc up brand new these days for £70–80. With a MIG you're looking at a minimum, I would say, of £150–180. But I say there's benefits to each one. With the MIG, it's actually a gasless, or I could use gas with it. I prefer to use it gasless, basically for economy. I don't like spending money, as you've probably seen if you've watched any other of my videos. It's preset, so you've no real worrying about temperatures. You could have a MIG that runs on gas, but it's just adding another problem to an inexperienced welder. You really want the basic things you can get to practice with, because the only way to learn with welding is to get one and to practice. There is no other way. Get it on a load of scrap metal and start welding. With the MIG, the only real thing you've got to worry about, these are all presets. Occasionally you will get a MIG that you can adjust the temperature. It's not very often these days. Most of them are on presets. So the only other thing you've got to worry about is your wire speed. The faster the wire comes out, the cooler you weld. The slower the wire comes out, the warmer you weld. That's basically it. There's not an awful, it's not rocket science. Basically easy because there's not much setting up of the machine to do. You buy spools of welding wire. That's the main difference between the MIG and the arc. Your MIG wire all comes on a roll. I wouldn't advise anybody buying a larger roll than this. This is a kilogram, 1 kilo. Because these smaller welders, it's only a very small motor that pulls the cable through. If you're going to put a big spool on a small motor, it's constantly putting your motor under stress. I know it's a ball ache swapping the rolls all the time, but this welder has lasted me for years and I've always stuck by that same policy. I have known friends of mine who buy these big 10 kilo rolls and within a year the motor's burnt out. So if you're going to go down the MIG avenue, always use small rolls. When it comes to changing the wire, you just remove the side panel. Most welders are the same. Sometimes the side panel will lift up on a hinge. Varies from company to company, I would think. You unscrew your welding wire. You feed it through there and that's your motor. You tension the wire up just by adjusting that. Most welders are pretty much the same, there's not much difference between them. And that's all there is to it. See, this is why MIG welding is so easy. Because when you're bringing your trigger across the material, the wire feed, which you're feeding through your trigger, automatically comes out to the end, which keeps the correct distance for you. All you have to do is keep your hand still. On other welders, your arc welder, gas welding, TIG welding, you're constantly having to move your rods closer to the material, as well as, you know, keeping a smooth action, if you like. This is why MIG welding is so easy, because it does a lot of the work for you. This is the earth clamp. You'll see a lot of people on YouTube, they've got steel tables where they can just chuck the material on, which automatically makes an earth. You don't need to do that. You can just clamp your earth clamp straight onto your workpiece. As long as that's got a good connection, you can weld like that. You don't need a big hefty table that's made out of steel and all this. You don't need it. If you get better at welding and you want to go further with it, then yeah, you build a table with a steel top. When you're just starting out, you don't need this stuff. So if you move on to your arc welder, now these are a lot different to the MIG. In some ways they are a little bit more complicated. To adjust the heat or the voltage, you turn the big knob in the centre. There's a gauge on the top which tells you roughly what sort of amperage you're using. I wouldn't advise anybody getting an arc welder above 180 amp because it'll always be tripping a fuse or tripping a switch for it. They just pull too much current for domestic use, my opinion. I know if I was just starting out, I'd be looking at a 115, maybe up to 140. Same principle again with the earth clamp. You don't need a table, you can just clamp it onto your workpiece. Once you start it up, that piece is earth. Now the beauty about the arc welder is you can buy different rods, stainless steel rods, which means you can weld different varieties of material. Not something to worry about when you're a novice. That's really when you get more into it and more into welding. But your rods, just click into your gun like that. Once your earth piece is earthed up, you just tap it on the end, which I'll go to in the next video. Once you get the arc going, away you go. My personal opinion, when you're first starting out, you want something cheap, which is the arc. You can learn more from the arc. Once you've mastered arc welding, the MIG will be an absolute doddle. I learned with the arc, I think a lot of people do, basically because of the cheapness. So if I was starting out, I would be looking at maybe a 110 or a 120 arc welder. You can pick up for about 70-80 quid, and away you go. Get yourself some rods and just start welding. Right, welding safety. If you're buying a new welder, whether it be a MIG or an arc, they'll probably supply you with a handheld mask. They can be a little bit awkward, so I would suggest to start off with, don't buy a dimming screen. A lot of them, they are brilliant, but they are a lot of money. For practicing, you don't need one. I would suggest, however, getting one of these that you can fit onto your head. It does make the job a little bit easier. These run at about, I think they're about 15 quid-ish. Good investment, much better than the handheld one. I mean, the handheld ones are fine, it's the same glass. It just frees your other hand up to do other things with when that's on your head. Gauntlets. I do use gauntlets when I'm using my arc welder. I've just chucked mine out, so I can't show you. I chucked them out about a fortnight ago when I was cleaning up. When I'm using the MIG, I'm not saying you do this, I don't tend to bother as much because I don't seem to get, there's not as much splatter comes off a MIG, but I do use gauntlets when I'm using the arc. Clothing, make sure you're not going to wear anything that's going to catch fire. You don't want anything that's going to melt. Common sense, you know, safety is paramount. I'll put a few pictures on in a minute. This is something that happened to me. I was 17 years old. Nobody could tell me anything. I knew everything at 17. And this is what happened. I was doing some welding in the back corner of my parents' garage. I was only welding for about 3 minutes, but that was long enough for a piece of splatter to roll across the floor and catch hold of some old oily rags that was on the floor. I turned round and half of the garage was engulfed in flame. I ran out, but within 8 to 10 minutes it was just a raging inferno. It was really scary. So if you do insist on welding indoors, always make sure there's somebody stood behind you telling you what's going off. Because to this day I still don't know how I made it out. That's why I don't do any welding inside the shop at all. I might, if I need something tacking up, or basically anything that's going to take me longer than 5 seconds, and that is a strict rule, I do outside the shop. Everything's much safer outside. The fumes that come off when you're welding, you don't want to be sucking that in anyway. If you need purposely to do something inside the shop, get somebody to fire watch for you. Make sure somebody stood behind you so they can see what's going off. Obviously don't let them look at your arc, but somebody there with you. Don't muck about with safety. These are brilliant tools, same as table saws and all the other tools you get. Safety is paramount. I'm not the most safety conscious of people, but one thing I do is respect these. So your MIG welder is really easy to use. You'll pick it up in no time. It's a bit like plug and play. You'll plug it in, after 10 minutes mucking about with it, you'll be sound. They are a little bit more expensive. The downside for me is once you've used a MIG, moving on to something else is going to be difficult for you. It's a bit like driving a car. If you take a test in an automatic, in a few years time if you want to move on to manual, it's going to be more difficult than just doing a manual from the start, my opinion. So I would recommend starting with the arc. It's cheaper, you can have more fun. The rods, you can get a big pack of rods like this for about 10 quid, which is more economical than the MIG wire. For mucking about in, you know, anything I've got to knock around here is 2.5 mil. You'll not go far wrong with that. You can weld pretty much everything with that. There is grade numbers on the top of a welding rod. It gets a bit too complex for beginners and people who don't worry about it. 2.5 mil rods, you'll be sound. I'm going to put a link in the description to AVE's Don't Buy a MIG video, which I think is brilliant. I mean, I love AVE anyway, I think it's funny. But in my opinion, I do agree with pretty much everything he says in that video. I've been welding since or about 13, 14. In our family, if you couldn't weld when you come out of womb, there was something wrong with you. And that's coming from a family of engineers and farmers. So it just becomes natural. I'll show you some welding tips next time, a few more safety tips. So I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, subscribe. I'll do another video on basic welding, how to set up these as best I can. But the real key thing is, don't be frightened of it, but go out and buy it. If it's a second-hand welder, go out and buy one. It's not going to be perfect. When you're starting out, yeah, it's going to look like bird shit. Yeah, it's not going to stick right. You're not going to learn until you actually do something. There's nothing better. Next time I'll go into some basic welding and basic joints, some more safety tips and what else I can come up with. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe for the next video.